Almost there, Lorna?
Yes.
No, sorry, Lisa.
Yes.
We are live, okay. And good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year to all those that we haven't seen for a little while. The last meeting was way back in the beginning of December, which seems a sort of eternity ago. So if I could be authorised, please, to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of December, please. Thank you. Excellent, thank you very much. Apologies for absence, Lisa.
Joe Powell, Interim Director of Community.
Thank you. Additional agenda items. I will mention that items 10 and 11 have been withdrawn. Are there any other additional items on the agenda, please?
There are none, Chair.
Thank you. Urgent decisions?
There are none, Chair.
Excellent. Disclosure of interests and dispensations. To receive any disclosures by members of disclosable pecuniary interest and other registrable interest, non-registrable interest in matters on the agenda, and the nature of any interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question.
Chair, item 9, the Housing and Homelessness Review. I declare non-pecuniary interest as a member of Bexhill Community Land Trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. On screen, there are no declarations. Hazel.
Yeah, thank you. The enforcement of environmental offences, item 7, member of Bexhill Town Council.
Thank you very much. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to consider the recommendation of the Independent Remuneration Panel's, the IRP, 2024 review in respect of members' allowances for 25-26. The IRP met in November 24, and the parameters of the review were to review the basic allowance for 25-26 and to consider the level of special responsibility allowances, SRAs, to be paid to the new chairs of the Audit and the Standards Committees, which you'll recall was split out earlier this year. Appendix A sets out their full report. Members probably want to note that and recall that last year the panel's recommendations were not accepted, and this meant there was no increase to the basic allowance. The IRP's report this year does still recognise the financial challenging times that the council is in, but is recommending that the basic allowance is increased this year. If we don't do that, it means that we'll fall behind other authorities and it will be difficult to align in future years. So the panel made 4 recommendations. The first one was that the basic allowance be increased by 3% for 25-26, which is in line with the 24 staff pay award. Recommendation 2 was that the SRA for the chair of the Human Resources Committee be reduced from 0.33 to a 0.22 ratio of the basic allowance, and this is recognised by the fact that the committee only meets a couple of times a year. Recommendation 3 was that the SRA for the chair of the Standards Committee be applied at 0.22 of the basic allowance, and recommendation 4 that the SRA of the chair of the Audit Committee be applied at 0.33 of the basic allowance. So this is a recommendation to full council, that the recommendations of the IRP and Cabinet's comments be received and determined, and that the Chief Executive be authorised to amend the members' allowance scheme within the Constitution following approval by full council. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lorna. Are there any questions or points that need to be raised? I'm very grateful of the Independent Remuneration Panel's work on this, and thank you, Lisa, for supporting them with the work that they've undertaken. I think it's been covered off by Lorna with regard to the last one that was undertaken and it wasn't put in place. And I'm grateful for members that also took the time to comment to the IRP various their views, which I think is very important. This will be considered by full council in February, I believe. Yeah, okay. To approve any increase in the allowances being regarded with regard to the recommendations. So thank you for everyone for the work that's been involved. I'd like to remove this. I'll second it. Thank you. And those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Item 7, the enforcement of the environmental offences. This is Richard Parker Harding's report as Head of Environmental Services, Licensing and Community Safety. The purpose of the report is to approve the procurement of a concessionary agreement for the enforcement of environmental offences in the period from 2025 to 2030.
Yeah, redeclare. Thank you.
Richard, are you going to talk us through your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report seeks approval for the procurement of a new concession agreement, enforcement of environmental offences. The current agreement we have with National Enforcement Solutions ends in July 2025, and therefore it's recommended that we begin a new tendering exercise, which will be a closed tendering exercise, just inviting the few national companies that exist to provide a tender so that we can continue with the level of environmental enforcement we currently carry out. This really means officers employed by National Enforcement Solutions currently patrol the district, and they issue, when they observe offences, fixed penalty notices, mostly for littering and some dog control offences.
Thank you, Richard. Catherine.
Yes, thank you, and thank you to Richard for explaining that. I think all of us experienced when this contract was new a certain amount of pushback from the public who didn't understand the position and certainly hadn't understood in many cases that what they were doing was technically an infringement of what they were supposed to be doing. But in my anecdotal experience, I would say that has completely died down, and I think all of us appreciate the benefits of having a much cleaner district and knowing there's somewhere to go to should a problem arise. So I'm very happy to support this.
Thank you. Any other members want to make a comment? Christine, please.
Yes, well, I'd like to thank Mr. Parker Harding for his work on this. I believe that Central Ward, for example, is 10 times cleaner and tidier than it has been in the past. I used to do quite regular litter picks, no longer feel the need to do those. And the bins are not overflowing in the same way that they have been in previous years. I mean, whether that's anything to do with the weather, I don't know. And also, I'd like to sort of congratulate you on using some of the income that we've had to clean up some of the graffiti that we've had. And that's made a sort of really big difference as well. So I'd like to congratulate you and Mr. Parker Harding, your staff that actually manage the contract, and some of the contractors that work with us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Councillor Paul Osborne. Paul?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, good evening and happy New Year to everybody. Yeah, I don't have a problem with this at all. I think it's as Councillor Phil has said, it started off a bit lively, if we could say so, but people have sort of come round to it, and businesses especially. I'm just wondering, do we have any figures on sort of the amount of fly tips we've prosecuted or anything like that in the last sort of 18 months, say, or last 12 months? You know, I'm assuming they're doing everything because they've got money left and we're clearing graffiti and tidying up. But I'm just wondering if there's any figures that could be available to anyone. You know, just a sort of simple breakdown. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Richard, have you got anything to hand, or perhaps you can go back to Councillor Osborne, if we haven't got them to hand at the moment?
At the moment, the NES are issuing 5 to 6 fixed penalty notices a day, mostly for littering. The numbers of fixed penalty notices issued for fly tipping is probably now only running at, say, a dozen a year, but we've had quite a big reduction in fly tipping. We used to have a lot of problems with fly tipping at the recycling centres, and that's really where lots of the fixed penalty notices were then issued. And we used to have a lot of people who used to put commercial waste into the litter bins, and again, that's when we were issuing lots of fixed penalty notices of fly tipping. So in a way, the fact that the number of fixed penalty notices has reduced is a success. So we can't criticise NES for not issuing as many as they used to, because their actions have actually reduced the problem.
I think it's a very good way of looking at it. Sorry, Hazel, I didn't realise you were...
Yep,
That's
thank you.
okay, no problem. Yeah, I'd just like to echo Councillor Bayliss's comments regarding Central Ward and just the general area along Bexhill, because it is so much better. And so thank you as well, Richard, for all that you do. And from a tourism point of view, it's nice to come to somewhere where there's not, rubbish all over the streets. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Barnes, John?
Yes, I'm not sure the position is quite as good in the rural areas, but that doesn't mean that I'm against what you're about to do. I think the firm has been pretty effective, and the improvement in Bexhill is good. The only thing that puzzles me, and I genuinely am slightly puzzled, we're looking at this for our area for 2025 to 2030. Of course, you will be aware, Lido, that we have an item on the County Council agenda on the 9th about a possible unitary authority. Will we put a clause in that allows us to review in that business? Because otherwise we're likely to end up with different regimes in different districts, and that could be a problem going forward. I genuinely don't want to oppose this. Seems to me it's the right step to take at this stage. But that is a slight puzzle in my mind about what's going to happen if we go forward.
Well, we don't know that we're going to necessarily go forward at this moment in time, and there's going to be quite a long lead-in time before the whole thing gets to the finer details. I don't know, Richard, if you wanted to make a comment on that just to satisfy the inquiry.
We also will be advised by the East Sussex Procurement Hub about how to properly word the procurement process. But at the moment, the existing agreement allows us to end the agreement with 3 months' notice anyway, so that will just be, I presume we'll just put that into the existing agreement, the new agreement.
That sounds very sensible, and I'm sure that covers off, John, your inquiry. Any other questions, Catherine? I beg your pardon? Oh, you're twitching. The new year started with a twitch. Okay, fine. Right, so if we can, someone can move this report, Catherine?
Yes.
And
Let's move it, please.
Move it, please. Thank you. And
Second.
Second on
Thank
that. And those in favour, and that's unanimous. And I would just endorse everything that's been said. People come up to me in the town centre on the promenade, actually acknowledging the fact that how much the public realm area looks neat and tidy. And I think that when you've got a deterrent, it makes people think twice. So thank you, Richard, for that report and the work that's ongoing. Just give me an idea what next page is. 33, perhaps?
23.
Or 23. We've just finished. Oh, sorry, 23. I beg your pardon. Yes, Barnhorn. Barnhorn Green NHS Development. The report from Joe Powell, who's unfortunately not able to be with us this evening. Have we got Lloyd? Lloyd is online, I believe. Lloyd?
Yes, I'm here. Good evening.
Before you say anything, I think Christine is just going to introduce the report for you then to come in with the nuts and bolts. Christine.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is a really positive report. It's a commercial project which actually was initiated prior to the elections in 2019. It was actually initiated by the previous administration in April 2019 that purchased the land as part of their then sort of commercial strategy in order to raise income. The initial plan was to build the surgery, some business units, and from that investment bring in a stream of income which would have sort of gone into subsidising council tax. That was the idea. I mean, lots of things have changed since April 2019. The impact of the mini budget in 2022 has meant, higher interest rates, which have impacted on our sort of ability to raise the funding and make a commercial project. This means that actually the project that was before Cabinet this evening is around development of the actual GP surgery, as opposed to the GP surgery and the business units. The business units will not go ahead. They're not commercially feasible at the moment. This is a good project. It's supporting infrastructure. If you talk to a lot of people, especially people living in Little Common, they will tell you, you're building all these houses and yet you're not providing the infrastructure. But actually, we are making real efforts here to do exactly that, working with the NHS, something that will, be commercially, it will give us a commercial return. Not as much as we had hoped, I think, in 2019, but there will be a small return. And obviously, we will have other properties which will be able to sell on or develop in the future. So this is a really good project. It's partially supported by Levelling Up partnership funding, which was obviously agreed by the last government but reconfirmed by the current government. So we're very grateful to the current government for continuing with the Levelling Up partnership money that we've got. And I commend it to Cabinet as something that we can agree. And I'll just hand over to Lloyd, who can give us, as you say, the nuts and bolts.
Thank you very much, Christine. And Lloyd, I know this has been quite a complex proposition that you've put forward, and I'm sure members will listen very, very closely in order to identify the way forward. I'll hand over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Christine, and good evening, councillors. So, I mean, as Christine has explained, this is a project which the council has been involved with for quite some time, having acquired the land back in 2019 with a view to constructing a new medical centre and the light industrial units. The intention of this project and the acquisition was always commercial, so it was always with the intention of generating some capital receipts for the council. As Christine mentioned, we're not currently planning to bring forward the light industrial units. That doesn't mean that has fallen away permanently. However, the state of the construction market and the property market is such that we don't have any solutions there that we could build that would generate any kind of profit or return for the council. So that gets parked, and we're looking into what we can do with that over the forthcoming period. However, the medical centre side of things is more positive. The sum of the scheme that we've put forward that we're proposing tonight does make a profit over the lifespan of the project. It isn't as large as we would have hoped. However, it does generate some returns for the council. It pays back all of the costs that have been expended to date. So on balance, we've recommended it as being the best outcome that we can put forward at this time. It not only generates a profit, but it also recovers the costs that have been expended. And it's the best option by quite a long way that we've been looking into. So in terms of the recommendations that are made, there are four separate recommendations. The first three are all of the property transactions which need to take place in order to allow this project to proceed. So the council will purchase and immediately lease back 2 existing GP surgeries at Little Common and Old Town Surgery. And the GP partners will remain in one of those permanently or for the foreseeable. In the other one, they will vacate that building once the new medical centre is completed. So that is recommendations 1 and 2, purchase and lease back. 3 is an agreement for lease and the lease itself of the new medical centre. So we will enter an agreement for lease now that commits the NHS and the GP partners to leasing the building from us once it is completed. So we have security that we're not building this new building speculatively, but we know the terms on which they will take on the building. And the fourth part is, having done all of that, we need to place a construction contract. The construction contract will be design and build, so we're passing the majority of the responsibility for risk, design, construction to the contractor. And the value of that we estimate to be in the region of £10 million. And alongside some other cost plus the expenditure to date, that takes the total capital commitment up to £12 million. And as we've heard, that is to be covered by £5 million from the Levelling Up Partnership Fund, which is secured, and the remaining £7 million is from borrowing. So I hope that's a sufficient summary. I know it's quite a quick rattle through, but I'll stop there for questions if that's okay.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Are there any questions here in the chamber? I see we have award councillors for Little Common here. I'm sure there's been a lot of inquiries being made of you guys by residents, but does this report satisfy the inquiries that you're receiving?
Yeah, just general inquiries about what happening to the other surgeries, which I think is a decision for the NHS and the ICB going forward, but I think it's a very welcome to St Mark's and wider Rother, because we need new medical facilities and it's a great move, and hopefully the Cabinet can back it.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'm led to believe that the quality of this new build is going to be quite a state-of-the-art sort of facility. Christine, can you just enlighten?
Yes, I mean it will be a sort of state-of-the-art GP surgery, and I mean in terms of like today's announcement made by the Prime Minister about reducing waiting lists and about moving care out of hospitals into the community, I see somewhere like this playing a major role in that, and that's something we can be proud of as Rother District Council. Health isn't in our ambit, but you know, we're here providing the facilities for that to take place. So that's really good news.
Thank you. And I think that with the coming under the mental health unit in Mount View Road, the diagnostic centre in Beeching Road, this new surgery that's going on in Little Common for the west of Bexhill, I think it just reflects, one, the NHS confidence that Rother can deliver. I think, albeit taken time, but it's not been an easy one to deal with. And, you know, Bexhill, you know, within Rother is becoming a centre of excellence, because this enables our residents of Rother to gravitate towards Bexhill. John, I see you have your hand up. John Barnes.
Yes, as a former chairman of the Primary Care Trust, this has been a dream since the early years of this century. And the kind of revolution that is going on in the National Health Service, as Christine says, is to try and get things out of the hospital and have a National Health Service rather than a National Hospital Service. That means modern medical centres, and I must say I think this one is going to be a tremendous asset to Little Common, probably less so to Old Town, and I see the provision is made for Old Town to remain for some little time. There are obviously distance difficulties in having a practice quite as widespread as this one is. The only slight query I have, and I speak from slightly bitter experience, from what went on in my own village in regard to the new school and the village halls is we had, or county had, a design and build construction. And the design really has shown up a number of faults which I think could have been avoided. And in particular, they use propane gas to heat it rather than solar. I just wonder if we could have a look at whether design and build is the best form of contract, particularly as the Integrated Care Partnership and the CCG will be involved, who have a great deal of experience in terms of what modern medical centres should look like. A straightforward design and build may not actually be the best answer, but that's my only query, and it is a query. It's not offering a definite against. I would be very strongly in proceeding with this as fast as possible.
Thank you for those comments, John. Will, would you like to respond in any way? Lloyd, rather?
Yes, I will do. Councillor Barnes, you're absolutely right about the the experience of the NHS partners and some of the vagaries of design and build. We're making a really conscious decision to move away from traditional forms of contract and the forms of contract which see lots and lots of hands-on involvement from the council in design and specification, because we simply don't have the capacity and the skill set to engage at the level that we need to. And we're seeing a lot of legacy issues crop up within the development processes because of that. However, that doesn't mean we're going completely from one end of the spectrum to the other. Although this will be a design and build contract, there will be performance specifications in there which are written by the NHS. So they will specify all of the requirements for things like finishes, heating, electrical services, fuel sources and the like. So we should be able to have the best of both worlds. The comment about distancing ourselves from design risk is more to do with the structure and the fabric, which is, perhaps less critical to us from that perspective.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. Ash, I'd like to see you, Ash. Happy New Year.
Hello, Happy New Year. Sorry about the waving hand earlier. I thought I'd put my hand up. I just wanted to, Councillor Bayliss has harnessed pretty much what I wanted to say, so I kind of echo Christine's comments there. And I think whilst obviously initially we were focused on the kind of commercial aspect of the whole project, I think the massive social impact has already been highlighted is, one of the big assets that this will provide to our residents. So really supportive of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ash. Councillor Biggs, Tony.
Good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. It's just a quick question for Lloyd. I'm reading on page 23, in 2019, £10 million was set aside for this project. Was that not ring-fenced? And if that's the case, then surely you wouldn't have to borrow £7 million.
Yes, that is. I don't know the answer to that, actually. I would have to check that.
I'm led to believe that money was acquired via the Public Works Loan Board for this particular project. And then in 2020, COVID came along and the whole thing was put to one side. But that funding was still ring-fenced for this project, where we then added to that the Levelling Up Fund. That's how I believe it was.
Yeah, that's the point I'm trying to make, Chair. If that's the case, then we shouldn't have to borrow £7 million, should we? That gives us a total of that gives us a total of 15 million, and Lloyd, you said it's going to cost roughly 12. So basically, we're 3 million in profit.
Well, costs of construction and products, etc., have actually added to that, and I'm sure that you appreciate over almost a 6-year period.
I do. I think it's an excellent project, but I'm just saying, if that's ring-fenced, then perhaps the 7 million we'd have to do.
Well, Councillor Biggs, I will check that. The £10 million would still have been borrowed from the 10 million, from the Public Works Loan Board, so it would still be borrowing. However, if it was ring fenced pre-COVID, it would be at a significantly lower interest rate. So say net effect, it would be a benefit. So I'm not aware that's the case, but I will check.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Lloyd. Connor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. I was just wondering why we're using a private legal firm and not in-house Wilden Rother Legal Services. Surely that's just going to incur some more costs going private.
Did you catch that? I don't know whether Lorna would like to touch on that one, Lloyd.
I mean, I can answer very generally, Lloyd. You might want to come in if you know anything more specific. But when we took on, or the SLA we have with Wilden Legal Services, we didn't have all the projects that we have now. So quite often on the project side, we do have to get some external support in. So it doesn't necessarily cover, or they don't necessarily have the expertise within the team to cover these kind of projects. But I don't know if Lloyd knows anything more specific on this particular project.
Yes, I mean, what you've said there is correct, Lorna, that the SLA effectively doesn't cover any of the development activities, and through discussion with Wilden, they don't have very much construction and development specific expertise. So we're working with them wherever we can, but as and when we're coming up against slightly more complex or specialist pieces of work, we're tending to outsource those because we're having to, and that's by agreement between ourselves and Wilden.
Thank you very much for that explanation. I'm sure that satisfies, Connor, your question. Jolly good. Councillor Sam Coleman. Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one to sort of, just to ask if maybe Lloyd or someone could give a small presentation on this to the Equalities Steering Group at some point, because I know a lot of the groups who attend that steering group work with pensioners, people with dementia in the community and other medical needs, and I think it'd be good for them to be informed about this, because it's a massive net positive to the well-being of the district. So.
Thank you for that point. Are there any other questions? No, there's not. So I think we now need to move this report. Thank you, Christine, and to second this report, Rory. Thank you very much. And that's the items as per the recommendation in order to allow the Barnholm Green Medical Centre project to proceed. And thank you very much, Lloyd, for bringing this one together. It's been a significant amount of work. Voting? Unanimous? Well done. Agenda item 9. Where are we? Is Catherine? Oh, Rory's presenting. Thank you very much indeed. So this is the review of the Housing, Homeless and Rough Sleeping Strategy 2019 to 2024. So this is a retrospective report. It's the report of Joe Pear, who's not with us, and to update members on progress of the improvement delivery plan of the homelessness, rough sleeping and housing strategy, which I think has been really quite successful compared to some of the difficulties that our neighbouring councils have incurred. Rory.
Thank you, Chair, and I redeclare my interest as a member of Bexhill Community Land Trust. You're quite correct, it is a retrospective look at the last 5-6 years in Rother, and I think it's important to understand the really challenging context that we have been in Rother. I mean, we started off in 2006, there were 216 people were homeless in 2017-18 and has risen to 571 by 23-24. In 2014, there were around 30 households in temporary accommodation, and that had risen to about 200 by last year. So, coupled with that, we of course had cost of living crisis and the spiralling of private sector rents, which meant that it's quite expensive for us to place people in the private sector. And the delivery as well has been rather difficult. As we know, just one year in particular, in 23-24, only 71 affordable homes were completed. And the need was around just over 300, I think, per year. So supply was not meeting the demand, and these pressures added to our financial pressures of Rother, but also the misery of people not being able to be adequately housed. And coupled with that, of course, the cost of living crisis, the cost of finance went up, high inflationary pressures meant that a lot of schemes were unviable. So registered providers, social landlords actually stepped back from their development programs, and this added further pressure to us. But I must say, I commend the housing team because I think they've risen to the challenge, and I think rather generally the staff have risen to a very difficult period. There are positives, the Blackfriars scheme in particular, hopefully looking forward to the future, will deliver 130 units, homes of affordable accommodation. We currently have a task and finish group on development, which is chaired by Councillor Barnes, which should be reported in the next few months. And one of the, I think, where we're way ahead and we've punched above our weight as a local authority has been the acquirement of temporary accommodation. We now own and manage 63 units, which means that we're able to, this helps with our financial bottom line, of course. And homeless prevention has been pretty successful, one of the best in the southeast, and 15% increase in prevention of homelessness through Joe and Catherine's team in the last year. So it's been a very challenging period, but there are lots of positives there that we can take from that. A strategy looking forward into the future from 2025 to 2030 will be going out to consultation in the next few months, but it'll be very much a continuation of what we've done already. We'll be ensuring, I'll just give some highlight bullet points on that. We'll be increasing access to high quality housing, continuing to increase the supply of temporary accommodation. We're hoping to get to 73 units by April 25, and 12 units of housing first accommodation for people, very vulnerable people who are at risk of homelessness, will be brought forward as well. So our low income family tracker, which is part of the anti-poverty strategy as well, will enable us to identify vulnerable households at risk of homelessness and work with them around debt management and other things as well. So there's some positives there. And I must say the pernicious use of Section 21 no-fault evictions will finally be brought to an end. We had 57 in Rotherham in the last year, people who were made homeless through these Section 21 notices. And I'm glad to say that the Labour government will be finally ending those. So there are lots of positives, but it's still a very challenging time, I would say, Chair.
Thank you very much for highlighting those points. But I can recall pre-2019 there was quite a scathing Ombudsman report on the inefficiencies that beset the council at that time, and I think that taking that together and the member task and finish group that was working alongside officers and the work that was undertaken by officers, and I think Catherine Harlow and Julia Ashton have moved a lot of paperwork forward to get us to where we are. If you can invite Catherine to make a comment, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was really pleased to read and receive this report. I think it really shows what a proactive council can do, even in the most challenging of circumstances. It won't be a surprise to you to know that Section 55 was music to my ears, because it does recognise what we know, but it's good to see it spelt out, that housing really can have an impact on the environment and this council's carbon footprint. And we need to remember that it's now 2025, and our pledge was to get to net zero by 2030. So we've only got 5 years left. And this, I think, makes a really positive contribution. And it's a recognition, I know, by Joe and his team that good quality housing is good for residents and good for the environment, and therefore good for all of us, whatever the tenure.
Thank you for those comments. I think we would certainly receive those wholeheartedly. Councillor Richard Thomas.
Just to repeat my declaration, first I'd like to endorse the remarks, the very, very sound and intelligent remarks made by Rory, Sam, and the work with Catherine, all of whom have made tremendous contributions. When you consider how difficult the background is, the context is, what the council has achieved, I think is miraculous, really wonderful. I just want to say a thank you to the officers who've been very supportive of the housing company. And I put this privately, but I'd like to put it publicly as well. We'd like to say thank you very much for all the support the housing company has received. I'd also like to add a few extra points. Firstly, I'd like to say something about the progress so far. We were hoping to make a start within 24 to 25, because of delays around the spine road, etc. This will slip slightly into the succeeding year, but it will make a considerable impact on the number of affordable homes. And I think that's something the Council is likely to be very pleased about. I notice the importance of the government targets and how extremely high they are, and regrettably the difficulties we've had in coming anywhere near them. The housing company can make a significant contribution in this area and will be doing so. And consequently, I think it's worth just noting the contribution the housing company can make in the future, and to expect, therefore, the housing company should be able to come up with some projects in the future which will enable the actual cost, the fixed cost of the housing company to be met. Because if we're having to pay for very, very experienced people, if we're getting advice from a whole series of very, very well-informed sources, this is going to be a fixed cost. And if we can defray that by actually using the housing company to build more projects, this will help all the objectives that we as a council have in relation to housing and meet those very, very important needs. So I just think we should be aware that that's something the housing company will be doing in the future. And finally, I just want to mention the importance of these housing targets in terms of the council's relationship with the government. If the government is really emphasising the importance of housing, it's very, very vital the council does so as well. Partly because we want to be on the right side of the government, but also because we want to show that we are in favour of the same objective, the objective of providing high-quality housing for people, which is also affordable and ecological. So I think there's a real importance to be attached to housing, and I'd like to see it come even further up the council's agenda. And just one very final comment. With the new arrangements, which of course we don't know about, as the leader has said, in relation to councils in the future, this will, on the one hand, present new challenges for the housing company, but at the same time, it will produce new opportunities. And I'd like to really end by stressing that there are opportunities for the housing company to work on a new arena, a wider canvas, and I think that's something which we can look forward to. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for sharing your views, Richard. Sam?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I think this is testament to the incredible work of Joe, Catherine and the team. I mean, I'm not going to talk about the anti-poverty strategy too much because I've spoken about it every time I can. It is mentioned in the report, so I may as well. But, even back when we were doing all that work, I was really impressed by Joe and the team's commitment to looking at the data and getting really into the data of these things so that we can target our limited resources effectively, working in partnership with sort of a multilateral sort of approach, whether that's housing companies, whether that's CLTs, whether that's other forms of housing delivery, the private sector, all of those things, and bringing them together. The proactive approach to things, which we've seen with the temporary accommodation purchases, and brilliant political leadership as well on the side. Obviously, Councillor McCourt, who has a lot of expertise in the area and is very modest about it, but I know that he's brought a lot to that team, and obviously Councillor Barnes as well in his chairing of that team. And I think I'm really optimistic about the messaging that we're getting at the moment from the new government in terms of delivering more houses along with infrastructure to support them, around tackling homelessness, improvements around temporary accommodation, in which actually a lot of the things they're saying are things that we've been doing and other councils need to get on board with, around tackling poverty, and around actually, taking this issue that by the horns, that we've done everything we can in a very effective way, actually, despite the fact it's quite difficult to do so from a local government perspective, and it's much easier to do so from a national one. So I think, hopefully, if those changes that we're being promised from the national governments materialise, it will supercharge this work and other work around it, and Joe and the team will be lauded in the history books of other district councils as being proactive, which is not, it's quite rare in local government, one might say. So, cheers.
Well, thank you for those comments, Sam. I think a lot of that we would totally agree with, and I think this is a big challenge. It's work in progress, but we're making progress. I think that's the important thing, and we're going forward. John, Councillor Barnes.
Yes, I wanted to just say a word of warm thanks to Joe and his team, who've really done a magnificent job, and are still doing it, working very closely with the task force. I don't think anybody should underestimate the problems that both sides of the housing industry, construction industry, are facing at the moment. It's not merely a shortage of skills, but the gap between prices and the ability to afford means that not only are the developers drawing in their horns, but also the people who supply affordable housing. And that's added to by the need to update very considerably the existing housing stock in housing associations. It doesn't surprise me, therefore, that our delivery of affordables is going to be very low in the year we're currently coming to an end of. And although there's going to be a considerable pickup in numbers later in this decade, in some ways that is because some of the major developments which were given approval way back in 2015, 2016, will at long last be coming onto line, and amongst them, of course, Blackfriars 2, which I think the housing company will be extraordinarily grateful to bring finally to a successful conclusion. It worries me, frankly, that the government are setting massive targets for weather, but with the disproportion between house prices after construction costs and what people are able to afford, I just wonder if they're going to put quite enough resources into both the supply side and the demand side, because I think you'll need to operate on both if we're going to deliver this very ambitious programme. But the important thing to remember is that the people need it. We have a very high level of housing demand in Rother. We're doing our damnedest to meet it. We've got a very successful housing strategy. We're about to review that and renew it. And we need to drive on with it because the people of Rother deserve to get the houses that they want at the price which they can afford.
Thank you, John. Are there any other comments? If not, we can look to move this report.
I'll formally move it.
And second, Sam. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. And I think that concludes this evening's Cabinet meeting. Thank you for those attending online. Thank you for those attending in person. The gallery doesn't seem to be terribly full tonight, but it was nice to see Richard here. Okay.
1917.
1917.